Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 27th Congressional District. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you here today, and I want to thank the Tribal Justice Collaborative for the invitation to speak on the very important topic of preserving the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA. Throughout my time in Congress, I've been committed to addressing the disproportionate impacts of federal policy on marginalized communities. From addressing health disparities for communities of color, advocating for a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, fighting for paid family leave for working families, and implementing meaningful reforms for LGBTQ youth in the foster care system, I believe that it is the responsibility of Congress to advance equitable policy solutions for those who've been historically underserved. So I was thrilled when the tribes approached me with the opportunity to work on legislation that is both in the best interests of Native American children and in the best interests of tribal communities. My bill, H.R. 8954, the Strengthening Tribal Families Act, will strengthen provisions for child state welfare agencies to comply with the Indian Child Welfare Act. ICWA established federal standards that ensured an Indian child removed from their home has the best chance to be placed within their tribe. Before ICWA, as many as 1/3 of Native children were forcibly removed from their homes by state child welfare and private adoption agencies, often without any justification. The vast majority of these children were placed in white Christian homes outside of the families and communities they knew. But the passage of ICWA set federal requirements designed to provide culturally appropriate services and keep Native children with their biological family or in their community whenever possible. For instance, agencies and courts must first consider placement with relatives, or if that is not possible, with other families within their tribal community where they can remain connected to their culture and identity. While ICWA has dramatically reduced the rate of Native children being removed from their families and culture, progress has plateaued and varies significantly by state. Native children are still 2.5 times more likely to enter the foster care system compared to the general population. So my bill will strengthen ICWA by tying compliance with these standards to the enforcement standards required for federal child welfare funding. This will increase support for tribal families and promote the rights of children to be connected to their extended family, elders, community, and culture. This bill does not create a new mandate, but merely carries out the intent of ICWA. In fact, states are already required to have ICWA implementation plans. Unfortunately, the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, currently lacks the authority to enforce those plans. This bill will give HHS that authority and will incorporate best practices for children in need of assistance from our federal child welfare system, as well as be true to tribal self-governing practices. It will also require a biennial report to Congress to help HHS finally start to get the kind of data needed to evaluate and further strengthen ICWA. With the legally designated role of HHS, we can finally have meaningful compliance with ICWA across the entire country and make compliance a necessary marker in their child welfare services planning. There is an urgency to get this bill passed right now. Earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear the case of Holland versus Brackeen to determine the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act. I am saddened to see this attack on ICWA coming from Texas, Louisiana, and Indiana, where the states believe Native children are best served by taking them outside of their communities. Any attempt to deem ICWA unconstitutional opens the door to weakening protections for tribal children and would allow state governments to indiscriminately remove these children from their families and culture. While I do not know what the decision will be from the Supreme Court, I do know that based on the decisions we have seen from this court this year, we cannot wait to take action. Because currently, ICWA is not tied to any federal funding, its opponents are using that to claim that there is no authority for ICWA to require states to comply with its standards. My bill will clarify that it is the congressional intent for states to comply with ICWA requirements by directly tying these standards to federal child welfare funding. I believe Congress must continue to recognize tribes' sovereign authority to make decisions about children who are tribal members. That is why I also joined my House colleagues in filing an amicus brief urging the Supreme Court to uphold the constitutionality of ICWA. We have seen throughout our history countless attempts by the U.S. government to steal Indigenous children from their homes and erase their identities. We cannot let this happen again.